The bridge between yesterday and tomorrow. On a quiet winter evening in the town of Willowbrook, Daniel sat alone on a worn wooden bench by the riverbank. The air was cold, and mist rose gently from the water as it slipped beneath the old stone bridge. His hands rested on his knees, but his thoughts were far from calm. Memories surged like waves, relentless, uncontrollable, pulling him back to moments he both cherished and wished to forget. He thought of Sophie, the woman who had once filled his world with warmth. Their laughter still echoed in his mind, mingled with the bitter sting of arguments and the suffocating silences that followed. Since their breakup, Daniel had carried the past like a heavy shadow. Every step he took was haunted. A song on the radio reminded him of her smile. A cafe they had visited whispered of their shared dreams. No matter how he tried, he could not escape her presence in his mind. It wasn't the past that clung to him. It was Daniel himself, holding on tightly to memories he didn't want to lose but couldn't bear to carry. The river before him flowed steadily, as if urging him to move forward, whispering that time never stops. Yet Daniel remained still, caught between longing for what was lost and fearing what lay ahead. That night, under the dim glow of the street lamp, he realized that sometimes the hardest battles weren't with the world, but with the memories we refuse to release. While Daniel wrestled with his ghosts, Sophie was fighting her own battles miles away. After their separation, she had returned to her parents' home in a quiet village outside Willowbrook, hoping distance might mend what was broken inside her. The familiar walls of her childhood room wrapped her in comfort, but at night, when the house grew still and she stared at the ceiling, memories of Daniel came flooding back. She thought of the day they met at the bookstore, how he nervously asked for her number, fumbling with words, his awkward charm making her laugh. She remembered the evenings they spent planning their dream of opening a cozy cafe, a place filled with music, coffee, and warmth. But those dreams now felt shattered, scattered like pages torn from a book. One evening, her father sat quietly beside her. After a long silence, he spoke gently. "Life doesn't ask us to erase the past, Sophie. It asks us to learn from it, and then keep walking. If you carry yesterday on your shoulders, you'll have no strength left for tomorrow." His words sank deep into her heart. For the first time, Sophie wondered if healing didn't mean forgetting Daniel, but learning to live with what their love had taught her. That night, she closed her eyes not with answers, but with a fragile sense of hope, an understanding that maybe the way forward wasn't to erase, but to transform. Daniel's own turning point came unexpectedly. One afternoon, his old friend Marcus invited him to help at a children's community art workshop. Daniel refused at first. His heart was heavy, his soul numb. How could he be around joy when sadness was all he carried? But Marcus insisted. "Sometimes the best way to heal yourself is to help someone else," he said. Reluctantly, Daniel agreed. The small classroom was alive with laughter, chatter, and the scent of fresh paint. Children darted around with brushes in hand, splattering colors across large sheets of paper. At first, Daniel stood back, hesitant, but gradually he felt something stir inside him. Amid the chaos, there was innocence, creativity, and hope. A little girl with curly hair proudly showed him her painting, a kite with a torn edge soaring high above the trees. Curious, Daniel asked, "Why did you draw it this way?" She grinned and said, "Because even if it's broken, it can still fly. You just have to fix the string." Her simple words pierced him like lightning. That night, Daniel returned to the riverbank. But instead of drowning in sorrow, he looked at the bridge with new eyes. Whispering into the cold night, he told himself, "I can't change the past, but I can fix the string. I can choose to fly again." For the first time in months, the weight on his chest felt lighter. As days turned into weeks, both Daniel and Sophie began to rediscover life, not by rushing into something new, but by healing piece by piece. For Sophie, it was music. She started teaching piano to neighborhood children. At first, every note reminded her of Daniel, each chord echoing with old memories. But slowly the melodies began to soothe instead of sting. The piano no longer carried sorrow, it became her path to healing. Watching her students smile when they mastered a simple tune reminded her that beauty could be created from brokenness. Daniel, meanwhile, poured himself into community work. The art workshop had awakened something within him, a sense of purpose he thought he had lost. He spent weekends volunteering at shelters, mentoring troubled teens, and even joined the town project to restore the old stone bridge by the river, the same bridge where he had once sat, consumed by grief. With every brushstroke of paint, he felt as though he was not just repairing stone, but mending his own heart. Though they lived separate lives, Daniel and Sophie were walking parallel paths of healing. Neither sought to erase the past anymore. Instead, they transformed it, turning pain into lessons and lessons into strength. Slowly, life began to feel possible again. Then, one crisp morning, fate intervened. The townspeople had gathered by the river for another day of bridge restoration. Daniel was there, sleeves rolled up, carefully painting the weathered stones. The bridge, once a silent witness to his sorrow, was slowly being given new life, just like him. That same morning, Sophie walked by, carrying a box of books to donate to the library. Her steps faltered when she saw Daniel. For a moment, her heart clenched with an old ache. But instead of pain, a surprising calm settled over her. She realized she was no longer broken by his presence. Daniel noticed her too. Their eyes met and time seemed to pause. The silence between them was no longer heavy, it was gentle. With steady breath, Daniel spoke first. "Hi, Sophie." Sophie smiled softly. "Hi, Daniel." They stood there for a moment, surrounded by the noise of laughter and hammers on wood, yet enclosed in a bubble of quiet understanding. They were no longer the same people who had once clung desperately to the past. They were survivors, stronger, wiser, and free. In the weeks that followed, their paths crossed often at the cafe, the library, or near the riverside. Their conversations began politely, then grew warmer. They spoke not of what was lost, but of what they were building now. Sophie shared stories of her piano students, their triumphs, their innocent joy. Daniel spoke of the teenagers he mentored, of their struggles and victories. Their words were no longer weighed down by longing, but carried by respect for each other's journeys. One evening, they sat together on a bench by the newly restored bridge, the setting sun painting the sky in shades of gold. Sophie turned to him and said, "For so long, I thought forgetting was the answer. But forgetting only kept me running in circles. What freed me was accepting that what we had was beautiful, but it's not who we are anymore." Daniel nodded, his gaze on the flowing river. "I used to think the past was a prison, but now I see it's just a chapter. And chapters aren't meant to be carried forever. They're meant to be read, learned from, and turned." They exchanged a smile, not as lovers rekindled, but as friends who honored each other's growth. Both had crossed a bridge. Not only the one of stone over the river, but the invisible one between holding on and letting go. And in that crossing, they found freedom. The lesson they carried was simple, yet profound. Healing doesn't come from erasing yesterday. It comes from embracing today and leaving space for tomorrow.